I want to now introduce Heather Block from the United Way, but she is here during this brilliant United Way campaign, which is underway right now. And she's been given the time and decided to take the time because this is important enough to focus, and we're delighted that United Way has given her the opportunity to be with us today. Charles Thrift is from the International Institute for Sustainable Development. The head office for the whole world is in Winnipeg, and Charles is a very active community member. We've served on the policy committee of the Manitoba Chamber. He's very much involved on behalf of the Institute in the creation of the PEG and the sustainability of it and the improvement of it. And these are two interfaces from those organizations on behalf of PEG, and they're going to tell you about PEG. Many Winnipeggers have probably never heard about it. When you hear about it, you'll check it out. You're going to spread the message. We got something very good going here, and hopefully it, together with the Global Peace Index, can be shared with the whole world. So, thank you. Who's going to go first?
Good morning. It's truly an honor to be here with you guys this morning. And I want to start by acknowledging that we're on Treaty 1 territory. And thank you very much for acknowledging that with the bundle. So when we came in, David Newman gave each of us one of these. It says, please accept this gift on behalf of Mama Wichita Center and Peace Day Committee to express our sincere appreciation to cross your path in the spirit of reconciliation, peace, and compassion. Together we made this medicine tie and blessed it in a sacred sweat lodge ceremony on September 6, 2016. And on the back it explains the 4 sacred medicines for our Indigenous people here in Manitoba. Thank you, Eduardo, for your presentation. I knew as I was preparing for today that when the time came, I would listen to Eduardo and I would think, oh, I should have prepared it differently, which is what happened. So I'll probably do a combination of what I prepared and some thoughts that came up for me as well while I was listening to Eduardo. Charles and I are here, as mentioned, representing PEG. So PEG is Winnipeg's community indicator system. And later on, Charles will show you a few slides that will pique your interest, and you're going to want to go, I think, look at the website afterwards. But it's a partnership of United Way Winnipeg and the International Institute for Sustainable Development. And as our tagline says there, the whole purpose behind PEG is to track progress and inspire action, which reminds me of the quote that you had, Eduardo, at the beginning of your presentation. Without measurement, it is hard to know whether our activities are helping or hindering us in achieving our goals. And that really is the thought behind the development of PEG. When I think about the story of PEG, when I think about the story of the Global Peace Index, when I think about the story of the many different ways we're trying to work in our communities, but making sure that we're putting our effort in the right place, this question is key and is one that we share together. How will we know if we're making progress on the issues that are important to us as a community? For PEG, that grew out of a number of things. From United Way's side, in the late 1990s, we had a large-scale community consultation, and one of the questions that we heard over and over again was, how will we know if all of our investments of time, of money, of other resources, how will we know if they're actually making a difference? And so a staff team set out to figure out, how will we know? How can we answer that question? How do we know whether we're headed in the right track? And through that exploration, learn more about community indicator systems and learned about IISD and their expertise with community indicator systems, with data and the credibility. And so we started on a process of engagement. We engaged the community to ask them, what's important to them. So when you look at PEG, the Community Indicator System for Winnipeg, it won't look exactly the same as every other community indicator system, because what matters to Winnipeggers is unique to us, and what matters to other communities is unique to them as well. But we asked Winnipeggers what matters, and so that guided our choice of the indicators, and Charles will show you some of that are on PEG. It was an interesting process, and I'll just note that what I discovered is that as a society, we are better at measuring some issues than we are at measuring others. When it came to economy, there were lots of indicators to choose from. We know how to measure economy. When it came to the natural and built environment, there were a lot of things that mattered to Winnipeg, but we're not tracking them yet. And so it really, coming back to that question, right, is what do we measure and how do we know if we're making progress? I want to just share a couple of thoughts or philosophies behind what we're doing. And I'm just going to fast forward to this one. So this quote is almost 50 years old. And when I read it, you might be surprised at that. It's from Robert Kennedy, and it really still resonates today, and it resonates with PEG and is a guiding thought. It's a long quote. Usually I don't use such long quotes, but if you'll forgive me that today. Our gross national product now is over $800 billion a year. But that gross national product, if we judge the United States of America by it, that gross national product counts air pollution and cigarette advertising, and ambulances to clear our highways of carnage. It counts special locks for our doors and the jails for the people who break them. It counts the destruction of the redwood and the loss of our natural wonder in chaotic sprawl. Sorry about this. It counts napalm and counts nuclear warheads and armored cars for the police to fight the riots in our city. And today we would probably add the resources that go into fighting terrorism. It counts Whitman's rifle and Speck's knife and the television programs which glorify violence in order to sell toys and video games to our children. Yet the gross national product does not allow for the health of our children, the quality of their education, or the joy of their play. It does not include the beauty of our poetry or the strength of our marriages, the intelligence of our public debate, or the integrity of our public officials. It measures neither our wit nor our courage, neither our wisdom nor our learning, neither our compassion nor our devotion to our country. It measures everything, in short, except that which makes life worthwhile. I think that resonates a lot with the negative piece and the positive piece that you were talking about, Eduardo. And so when we look at a community indicator system, we're looking at what makes life meaningful for us as a community. What are those positive things? Sorry, I'm going to go back to one other quote first. This is a more recent quote from 2009. The time is ripe for our measurement system to shift emphasis from measuring economic production to measuring people's well-being. And measures of well-being should be put in a context of sustainability. Those are some of the philosophical thoughts that guided us as we developed PEG, along with that focus on local priorities, local initiatives that matter. So when we think about PEG, one of the ways that we describe it is that caring is important, but it's not enough. It's really important to respond to people, but we need to do more. We need to know how we're doing. We need to measure where we're at, and we need to measure not just a snapshot of where we're at right now, but what are the trends? Are we getting better? Are things getting worse? And then when we know how we're doing, that's when we can decide where we can celebrate together as a community and where we need to work together to do things better. I'll echo some of what came out through the Global Peace Index presentation around that we can't do it alone. It's not one person, and we really recognize that to make change in our society requires all of us across sectors working together, which is part of why we're super glad to be with you this morning and to bring more people into working together. So when we see where the needs are, then we can inspire change, we can work differently, and we can start right now. So I'm going to turn it over to Charles, and he's going to, that was sort of the background behind it, but he'll give you a better sense of some of the details and how it looks and works.
Thank you, Heather. So this is a screenshot from our website. These are our 8 theme areas, and it's within those 8 theme areas that our indicators of well-being lie. We have about 60 plus indicators in the system. Number changes a bit over time. Roughly 8 per theme area. Some have more and some have less. But I'd like to go back a little bit to the Global Peace Index and the Positive Peace Index to talk a little bit about some more of the similarities and differences. So as Eduardo noted, those are really very much at the national level. It's an international index, so you get a lot of national data. And some of that isn't very as relevant to the local level. But I think there are an awful lot of overlaps. And there are a lot of similarities. So I'd like to start talking about some of those similarities with one of the findings from the UK Peace Index. And it says poverty and deprivation and employment opportunities, educational outcomes, access to basic services, and inequality are closely related to peace in both the UK and the US. And I think that would apply in a lot of countries. And really, this is what PEG is all about. PEG is about looking at poverty and tracking deprivation and employment opportunities, and education, educational outcomes, access to basic services. It's about so much more as well. It's about health, our environment. It's about social capital. How well do we know our neighbors? Because all of these things are related to well-being. Here's that figure that Eduardo had showed earlier about positive peace and all the different elements of that. And I think there's an awful lot of overlap here when it gets to things like equitable distribution of resources, in terms of human capital and education, in terms of sound business environment. All of these things are captured within PEG. So with that, I'm going to go through a few examples of some of the kinds of data indicators that we have and some of the ways that we show our data within our website. So the first one here I've pulled up is perception of safety. This is how safe do people feel walking alone at night in their own neighborhoods. This is a really important indicator because it really affects how people live, what kind of activities they participate in, where do they go, what kind of locations do they go to or avoid, what kind of transportation choices they make. So it's really about how they live. It's also about social capital and trust in their neighbors and in strangers and how they feel in their own community. But I also wanted to just give you a quick outline in terms of the kind of information that we put on here. There we are. So at the top here, we usually have a quick definition. We show a quick trend here, so you can see how things are changing over time. In this case, there are a few ups and downs, but there isn't a major shift in one direction or the other. We also like to try to include some videos that show stories of people's experience in our city and how they're experiencing these numbers. Because though the numbers may speak to, I guess, our minds, hearing stories really touches us in a different kind of way and helps us relate to how it actually impacts us in our community. And we always make sure to have extra information about where that data is from, why it's important, and how it's the data was compiled. Another example I'd like to pull up quickly is around personal safety. So this is similar, but this is the actual numbers. In a way, this is more closely related to to negative peace. Actually, it's very similar to one of the negative peace, the Global Peace Index indicators, the violent crime indicator. This is looking at the number of homicides, sexual assaults, and robberies per 1,000 individuals. And you can see actually the trend there is slowly decreasing over time, which is a great news story. However, when you break it down, and this is something that we try to do as much as possible, wherever we can in our community, we try to break down the indicator by different areas in our city. We have these 12 standard geographies. These are 12 areas of roughly similar size and population. Winnipeg has a population of about 800,000. So you can imagine that divided into roughly 12.
You see where Eduardo lives there.
Yes, St. Vital is in there, right there. It's a safe area, according to the scrap. But we organize these always by median household income. So the lowest median household income is on the left, and the highest median household income is on the right. And at the far end, we've got Winnipeg there. And what this does is it allows us, for every one of our indicators where we can break it down this way, to get a sense of how income impacts each one of these indicators. And here, obviously, and I think it'll be no surprise to most of us, that a lot of the crime in our community is happening in the lower income areas. And this is, I think this is a really important message, that inequality really does impact our community. It really hurts our community. Another piece I wanted to mention just on this graph before moving on is that all of these areas here, everybody knows roughly what St. Vital is or downtown, but the boundaries, sometimes people can't picture in their mind, what does this geography mean? So another way of showing the data is through a map portal. So we have another way of looking at the data, just so you can just look at it in a different kind of way. So here's household income broken down by neighborhood. We have 236 neighborhoods. A lot of our data isn't available at this small level. But this way, then people can look at specifically where they live in the city and how they're comparing against other areas of the city. How are they doing? And how do things vary across the community? So this is a quick snapshot kind of view. We also provide the option to go and pick a few different areas. So here I've picked 8 different communities and 2 different clusters in the city to look at, in this case, educational attainment, so percentage who have a bachelor's degree or higher, though we could look at those who haven't completed high school. So this really gets at human capital, and it emphasizes, to a certain extent, the gaps that can be filled in our community and how we're doing in different areas of the city. I don't want to spend too much time going through all the different indicators that we've got, because we have a lot of them. But I wanted to show just a couple of them here to show some of the kinds of messages that we can pull out from this. So at the top here, I've got median household income, just to give you a sense of how income varies across the communities. And in this case, I've got highest median household income on the left and lowest on the right. The next one down here, I've got life expectancy. So the community areas are in the same order here. And you can see that life expectancy really changes. The highest life expectancy is in the wealthier areas and lowest in the right over there. This is a little bit zoomed in. So 60 is at the bottom here, and this is 82 at the top here. So I'm not trying to blow out of proportion the differences here. But I wanted to show the difference between the lowest and the highest areas. So again, population of Winnipeg, 800,000. So each of these areas has a good number of people in it. That gap there is 10 years. So 10 years in life expectancy at birth. So if you think people who are born in the Point Douglas community area can expect 10 years less of life, which is startling, I would say. It's it's even more shocking if you divide those areas and further subdivide those areas. If you divide Winnipeg into 23 roughly similar areas, you get a gap of about 18, 19 years of life expectancy. I think those statistics are pretty alarming. Really speaks to the inequalities that we have in our community and the barriers that we have to overcome. The last one I wanted to show here, though, is a more positive story, though from the start you might, it's hospitalizations due to injuries in children under the age of 5. This is a story about the safety of a child's environment. Most of these injuries are due to falls and get fractures and things, or they're burns or scalds from hot water or fires. And what this is showing is first of all, there is a big gap between the lower income areas and the higher income areas, and right across the spectrum. But also that over time, we've really reduced those numbers. So across Winnipeg, over these 3 different graphs representing 5 different time periods, the number of hospitalizations due to injuries has decreased by about 30% across our city. 30% decrease over 15 years is pretty substantial. But in some of the lower income areas, that number has actually decreased by half, which is even more startling, which is, so what has happened here? A lot of those changes are due to things like changes to the building code around hot water tanks. It has to do with things like playground safety standards. It has to do with availability of smoking materials. It has to do with fire codes and awareness around fire codes. It has to do with a whole range of different factors, and all of those come from different parts of our city and different kinds of organizations, whether they're schools or the municipality or national bodies, and all together working towards common kind of aims, you're able to see these kinds of changes in our community. So we still have a long way to go. We're still significantly higher than other cities in Canada, but we are measuring what matters now, which is the first step. Now, as Heather mentioned, there are definitely still gaps in what we're measuring, and I would say pieces among them, but we're making progress. So to wrap things up, a couple of quick conclusions, and this is to a certain extent reiterating some of the messages that we've already heard. Some of our most pressing issues can't be solved by any one organization. This is really a challenge to work across our city, across our communities, to address these issues. And I think actually there are some real opportunities here to achieve something big on these kinds of issues. And the last point is that resources in our community are always tight. We need to know where to invest our money to make sure that, and to keep our eye on the ball to see if we're making a difference, to see if we're getting the results that we're expecting to see. And if we're not getting the results that we expected to see, we need to learn from what we're doing. Where we are having successes, we should celebrate those successes, share those successes so that others can learn. And where we're not having those successes, we need to re-examine what we're doing and look at what we're doing and see how we can work differently. Thank you very much.